Africa Prime, brought to you by Jamison's Select Reserve.
In 2010, the world watched as Africa hosted the FIFA World Cup and discovered the continent's love affair with the game. A game that has the potential to break down barriers, unite nations, and bring substantial development on both a social and economic level. Football fever is rife in Africa, but is enough being done to boost the game to reach its true potential? Hello and welcome to Africa Prime. I'm Godfrey Mutizwa. This week, we keep our eye on the ball, focusing on football development in Africa. Joining me now to give us their views on the game and its place on the continent is Floyd Mbele. He is CEO Orlando Pirates FC. And joining me from our Lagos Bureau in Nigeria is Colin Udoh, editor, kickoffnigeria.com. Gentlemen, welcome. Floyd, let's begin here at home, because the story we want to tell is the story of what the World Cup bequeathed to South Africa and the African continent. In a nutshell, what did we get?
We got a business card that we can use anywhere in the world. From a PR point, we've been able to market this country, one as a tourist destination of choice, but also as a country where, from a facilities point, we're able to host major world events. And I think from that point on, we got a business card like no other in the world. And I think it will hold us in good stead, provided that we are able to push even more in terms of making sure that people realize what opportunities are available for using South Africa as a tourist destination.
How much is that card worth? Are you able to put a monetary value to it? We're a world obsessed by material things, but the taxpayer surely must demand to see what that price tag is.
I'm not sure you can quantify it, because I think the benefits are that
it's priceless.
It's priceless, no, absolutely, and it's not only something that you can quantify in terms of either the value or the time, indeed, because it could be a business card for the next 10, 15 years. It depends. What is it as an add-on that we use to make sure that we keep that momentum?
Let's break down that business card. We know it includes infrastructure. South Africa got infrastructure that probably it would never have been able to build if it had not hosted the World Cup. So we know about the infrastructure part of it, but we'll come to that. We know about also the administration that was infused with a world body like FIFA that got South Africa to host what some are saying was one of the best World Cups ever, but which from an African perspective will say was the best because we had nothing to measure it against. Let's begin at the infrastructure. Was the infrastructure that we got worth it?
No, absolutely. Obviously, there would have been challenges if we had not hosted the World Cup, insofar as justifying the kind of capital that we used on the stadia and infrastructure like that. But having said that, you have to look at the entertainment industry, which football is positioned in, to say we're able to get a benefit from it. And the benefit for it is that when you do have activities such as the recently held Vodacom Challenge, and you go to a place like Mbombela, the economic spin-offs are great, because whereas Mbombela is positioned where it forms a triangle with Mozambique and Swaziland, the economic spin-offs for all three areas in that space. So if you're able to measure some of those aspects, you do get a sense that it has been worth a while.
Colin, out there where you are in Nigeria, Floyd says here the price that South Africa got for the Football World Cup was priceless. Do you get the same view?
Oh yeah, certainly. I mean, you've got to look at it from a broader perspective. I mean, I was speaking to some friends in the United States, and they said, look, prior to the World Cup, they didn't believe that, I mean, they've seen pictures, but they didn't quite believe that Africa, was as good as it looked and, could organize a tournament that big. So when you talk about a business card being so priceless, yes, and it's not just about South Africa, it also goes as far as all of Africa, because then it presents a different picture to the rest of the world, and they can actually see that Africa is not some dark continent, some dark unexplored continent that nothing can happen, but that it's a continent that can stage a successful and, I mean, one of the biggest tournaments in the world.
Now, one of my issues with the World Cup, at least one of the issues that I wanted to see addressed and also help improve, is the issue of the quality of the game. Now, we do know that Africa has produced world-class players. I mean, I can mention dozens of people who have come out of Africa and wowed the world. But did the game that we had last year improve the quality of football in Africa?
Well, the game doesn't improve because you hosted a World Cup or any tournament. The game improves because, one, you've got innate natural talent, talented players on the continent. The game improves because they've got the opportunity to show those skills to fans and the rest of the world. And the game improves because they want to earn a living out of that talent. So, yes, the World Cup did provide a jump-off sort of, from what has happened before, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it automatically improves the game. What it does is give even more fillip to what was already there.
Yeah, but in addition to that, one of the issues that people spoke about was the fact that the World Cup was supposed to lay down the foundations, if you like, for a stronger commitment to building the game across the continent. Did you get that sense that that foundation was built in places as far away as Senegal, Sudan? Well, I can't speak about the Horn of Africa, but perhaps further on south here.
No, not exactly. Again, like I said, you don't expect one tournament to do anything more than just, provide entertainment for a period. What leads to sustained development, sustained improvement is the structure that are already there, that will be there and that have been planned for over the long term. And unfortunately, yes, the euphoria of the World Cup helped get maybe a few more kids interested in playing football. But the important thing is football has always been Africa's passion, World Cup or no World Cup, and kids will always play football. The World Cup gave them added incentive to do that, but I don't think long term you can say the World Cup actually did that. Those kids will continue to play football because their stars play football, because they watch football at the top level, and because they want to get a way out of the poverty in Africa.
Floyd, was there a marker in the sand put down by the World Cup for you?
No, look, I think maybe not from an African perspective, but certainly from a South African, because with the infrastructure development, you must appreciate that it affords clubs in South Africa an opportunity to be able to use world-class facilities. And with that, some clubs are able to get 99-year leases and so on to these facilities. The good thing about owning a facility or being part of a facility long-term is that the quality will improve because you have a base to operate from. Now, all of a sudden, a team in Polokwane, for instance, as opposed to using a rural facility, is able to use a World Cup facility that is world-class. And having said that, if the quality of the infrastructure is good, I'm sure it affects the performance because you're able to play on fields that are at international standard. Yes, that benefit may not be immediate, but over a long term, you do find that that quality does sort of improve.
Let me play the devil's advocate here. I suppose, as journalists, we have to ask the difficult questions. Were there any negatives?
No, certainly.
None?
No, there were negatives, no, absolutely. I think the negative was that there was a lot of expectation in terms of what people individually could be able to benefit from it. And I think from a marketing point, perhaps a lot could have been given to the people in the country or in Africa in particular to be able to have some sort of role to play. But you must understand that the risk that FIFA is not willing to take is that they see using the World Cup as a vehicle for themselves to be able to put marketing initiatives.
Yeah.
So they're not going to cede that to countries to be able to do it for them.
But couldn't have a special case have been made for Africa, given, number one, the fact that Africa is the world's poorest continent in economic terms, not in terms of talent in football, let's be clear about that, but in terms of development. And therefore, after the argument that Sepp Blatter made for hosting the Cup in Africa, surely FIFA could have made a special dispensation for Africa.
Well, look, it always helps to work with the benefit of hindsight.
Sure.
And I think we're working now in view of the lessons learned. And I think perhaps that is what FIFA would be able to learn getting into Brazil, to say there are material conditions in the different continents, such as the purchasing of tickets, the value of the tickets, and so on. So in terms of part of the challenges that we may have had, for instance, was for able to have an identity system to be able to pre-book or pre-purchase tickets. In Africa, that may not be feasible or possible indeed, because we've got to look at the viability and feasibility of people using the internet to be able to make those purchases, that some of the countries are not as well developed, and for that reason it's not accessible. So I mean, that's why I'm saying it's lessons learned, and perhaps when they get to Brazil, they would have gone through this as an analysis and make sure that they use some of these as the material conditions in that continent are able to assist.
Colin, for you from the north of Africa, any negatives?
Well, you know, the thing really basically, one, from a football perspective and also from an infrastructural perspective. Now, from a football side, we did expect that, you know, well, there were expectations that because the tournament was being hosted in Africa, the African countries would take the home advantage and do well. Unfortunately, apparently it looked like the African countries spent too much time thinking about the fact that the tournament was being hosted here and didn't prepare enough to do very, very well. And Ghana was the only country that went as far as just the quarterfinals, which really wasn't good enough from a continent that had 6 representatives at the World Cup. From an infrastructural perspective, again, the expectations were that because the tournament was being hosted in Africa, a lot of African countries would develop their facilities, enabling the countries that qualified for the World Cup to come there, operate base camps out of there, you know, train, and then before moving down to South Africa. Yeah. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Even the neighboring countries around South Africa, the Mozambiques, Namibias, they didn't get those facilities up, and they didn't get those countries coming in to operate those base camps there. So in the end, I think that infrastructural development was limited to South Africa itself and didn't really quite go around the rest of Africa. So from that perspective, those two perspectives, I think, yeah, there were negatives.
Did FIFA itself give back enough?
No, I wouldn't say so. I mean, the World Cup is a $4 billion business, and to be honest, I'm not sure how much of that $4 billion got to the rest of Africa or even Africa itself. The thing is, on a yearly basis, FIFA doles out $1 million to you know, I beg your pardon, on a 4-year cycle, $1 million to each member association. So that's not Africa specific. That's to all the member associations of FIFA. And then, of course, the ones who qualify for the World Cup do get some sort of payments to qualifying bonuses and what's involved in qualifying for the World Cup. But outside of that, and the Goal Project, which is, again, is a project that goes all around the member associations, I don't really think there was any real thing you can point to and say this was what came back to Africa. Yes, the score for Africa, the Score for Africa project is a sustainable long-term project, but I think we really needed a lot more after hosting the World Cup, again, specifically because, like you said, this is the poorest continent in the world.
Indeed. We need to take a quick commercial break now. When we come back, we examine the business of football. Is this an industry, or is it a pastime we indulge in and by accident discover the George Weahs, Abed Pelés, Samuel Eto'os of this world?